Satipatthana Sutta. But actually, if you want to understand Satipatthana properly, you have to look at the entire Satipatthana Samyutta, all the discourses on Satipatthana. You have to look at Satipatthana wherever it is found in the suttas. And there's quite, as you may have seen already, there's quite a lot of information in many different places. And in the end, you also have to do things like the comparative study that you saw before. This is a very important principle to kind of expand your understanding, to take into account all the various sources that are there. But so that's what we have done so far, and we have already come to some pretty radical conclusions already, but interesting, I think, about what kind of is the primary purpose of this, and what is the primary kind of practice, and that's already quite interesting. So what I want to do now is I want to come back to the actual Satipatthana Sutta and look a little bit about some of the details of especially the things that we have to kind of establish beforehand, before we start to practice, so that you have, we kind of get the background material right before we actually get onto the meditation practice itself. So let's see what we have here. So here we have the sutta. Is there any questions, by the way, maybe before I continue, because it's already been a lot already? Or is everyone really happy? Or are you, after the meal, maybe you're so content after the meal, no more questions? A little bit dull and really happy. Oh, okay, whatever, anything is okay. That's what usually happens, so that's good. Okay, so let's then come to the actual Satipatthana Sutta and just have a look at the kind of the material which comes before we actually get to the meditation itself. So that's what you have there. Let's maybe expand it a little bit, see if we can get a bit more. How is that? Okay, that's better. Yeah. So this sutta is known as the Satipatthana Sutta. What is the meaning of Satipatthana? What does it actually mean? Unless the word Satipatthana is a compounded of sati on the one hand and upatthana on the other hand. And this word sati in Buddhism is very interesting because it has it's not very easily translated into English, for example, because it has like at least a couple of different meanings. And one of the original meanings of sati is memory. Remembering things, having clarity about what happened in the past. It actually refers to memory. And that is interesting because when you practice your meditation, you have to have like clear comprehension, we shall see that in a second. And clear comprehension or full awareness implies some kind of memory, that you know what you are doing. You have to have sati in the sense of being aware of the object, but you also have to know whether you're actually doing the right thing here. Sometimes sati, okay, angry, but wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be angry. So then you have to know that the clear comprehension tells you you're on the wrong track already, you're heading down the wrong track. So sati has this double meaning of attention on the one hand, being aware of what is happening, and also the idea of memory at the same time. And attention and memory are very closely related to each other, because when you are very clear about what is happening, if your attention is strong, it's also easy to remember later on what is happening. And when your attention is clear, it is also not easy, only do you lay down deep tracks of memory, but it's also easier at a later point when you if you have good attention later on, it also helps the memory as well. So both when you lay down the memory traces and you want to recall them, then a clear attention is very, very powerful. So sati has both of these sides to it. And upatthana, the word upatthana is related to the word upatak. Upatak, you hear very commonly in Buddhist circles, it means like an attendant. So upatthana is like attending, So this is why I call the four satipatthanas the four, actually I call it four applications of mindfulness. You could also call it the four attendings with mindfulness if you wanted to. But I think the four applications of mindfulness is a very useful way of thinking about these things. So why what's the difference? Sometimes you may have heard translations like the 4 applications of mindfulness. Yeah, is that bad or good? 4 applications of, is that the kind of dodgy translation, or is it an acceptable translation? 4 foundations. You like foundations, Eiling? Sorry? Focuses, yeah. That's Ajahn Brahm's translation for focus and mindfulness, exactly. Yeah. So the idea here, and the reason why this makes a distinction is because if you think about it as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, it gives the idea that these are things that give rise to mindfulness. They are the foundation which then mindfulness builds upon, 4 foundations of mindfulness. But that is not really what it means, because if you read the sutras, and we'll see this in a second, you actually have to first of all establish mindfulness, and from that mindfulness is it possible then to develop the meditation practice. You can't really meditate at all without mindfulness being established first. So from that point of view, the 4 focuses of mindfulness, which is Ajahn Brahma's translation, that's better, because then you actually, first of all, you have mindfulness, then you apply the mindfulness in a certain way, to focus on the object or whatever. Or for applications of mindfulness, again, you apply mindfulness in a certain way, and it makes sense. So translations can sometimes be tricky, and sometimes you have to think, what does it actually mean? And sometimes you come back to a word, and after a couple of years you realize, actually, maybe that wasn't such a good translation after all. Sometimes it takes a while before it kind of sinks in what the translation really is about, and how, whether it reflects properly on the Pali or whatever. Anyway, so that's the word Satipatthana, application of mindfulness. You're applying mindfulness. So for example, when it comes to breath meditation, first of all, you're mindful, and then you can apply that mindfulness to the breath. If you start off really dull and confused, it's going to be hard to do the breath meditation. So this is the Satipatthana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 10, and this is how it goes. I'll just start off with the initial paragraphs here. So I have heard, at one time the Buddha was staying in the land of the Kurus, near the Kuru town named Kammasa Dhamma. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, Venerable Sir, they replied, and the Buddha said this. So again, you can see here at the beginning, it is in the land of the Kurus, and this is one of the kind of strongholds of the Brahmanical tradition, as I mentioned before, close, not so far from modern-day Delhi. And some people seem to think that there is a Ashokan pillar where this sutta was spoken, but there seems to be some controversy about that. It's not quite sure whether that actually is the case or not. I haven't seen any reliable evidence personally that actually that Ashokan pillar is that place, but who knows? So we'll just leave that as it is for now. Venerable Sir, they replied, the Buddha said this, mendicants, the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation, this is his Ajahn Sujatā's translation for the Satipatthanas, are the path to convergence. They are in order to purify sentient beings, to get past sorrow and crying, to make an end of pain and sadness, to end the cycle of suffering, to realize extinguishment. And I'm not going to go into too many details because there is a lot of things here which is quite interesting. But you will see here, one of the things that he has here, mindfulness meditation, Satipatthana, which I think is an okay translation. Here it says they are the path to convergence. Yeah, have you ever seen any translation like that before? This is Ajahn Sujatā's translation, and I think he's the only one who translates it like this. Where does he get this idea from? Path to convergence. All the other translations say something like the direct path, or something like that. That's direct path is quite a common one used these days. But here, path to convergence. And the Pali word behind this is ekayana. And ayana is a word which means like to move towards or to go towards. And eka means one. So it's like one going or going to one. Both of those interpretations are possible. One going is like direct in the sense of going, towards something, only going to one place. It's a direct path to that place. But if it means going to one, it's a different meaning. What does going to one mean? And the word eka in Pali, one, is often used as a meaning samadhi. Yeah, ekata in Pali is a unification of mind. So eka has this idea of oneness. In other words, the idea of samadhi. So convergence here is is a way of looking at, is taking this idea of samadhi very seriously. So Satipatthana is the path to samadhi. And we have seen already that that makes good sense in terms of how the path progresses. Yeah? And here is just an added kind of thing about this being the path of samadhi. Is he right? Is this translation make any sense? Is it correct? And the answer is, I don't know. It's hard to say. It is very, it is maybe stretching things a little bit, but it is certainly a possible translation. And one of the things about the sutras is that sometimes there are not necessarily only one possible interpretation of things. There can be a number of interpretations, so it is hard to kind of pin it down necessarily. Anyway, let's not get too bogged down into that. If you want to read more about his justification for that, there's a long justification in his book, The History of Mindfulness, where he brings in pre-Buddhist scriptures, Brahmanical, typical, brings in, 10 pages, densely typed pages of pre-Buddhist scriptures and kind of justifies it on those grounds, etc. So it is quite involved. But you don't really need to worry too much about it because we kind of agree what the purpose of the path is anyway. And then it has all these beautiful consequences, to purify the sentient beings, to get past sorrow and crying, make an end of pain and sadness, and to end the cycle of suffering and to realize extinguishment. So again, you can see here the very high ultimate purpose of Satipatthana practice. But now comes the paragraph I really want to look at, which is the next one, because this sets down the prerequisites for this kind of meditation practice. So what are these for? It's when a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. They meditate observing an aspect of feelings, and then an aspect of mind, and largely an aspect of principles, and with the same kind of prerequisites, keen, aware and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. So here you are. So first of all there, you start with the idea of observing an aspect of the body, or an aspect of the mind. And this is this refrain, kaya, kayanupassi, or chitta, chittanupassi. And so the idea here is that you can look at the body from many different points of view. You can focus on certain aspects of the body. For example, if you're looking at the 31 parts, you can look at any one of those 31 parts. The breath also is an aspect of the body. So I think that is a very good translation of that particular phrase. And very often that phrase is really strange. If you follow the commentaries, they translate it as you observe the body as a body. And it's kind of weird. You observe the body as a body. It's not entirely obvious what that is supposed to mean. But the commentary explains it as well. You don't see anything in the body which isn't there. You just focus on the body as it is. But still, it doesn't really bring it out very clearly. So I think this translation is a really good one. And it's a very straightforward translation. It is not kind of really involved. You don't have to kind of know a lot of background information to be able to understand this. And this is one of the things in the suttas. Suttas are meant for ordinary people. It's not meant for people who are super duper intelligent, to have a PhD in kind of theoretical Dhamma or whatever it is, not theoretical physics, theoretical Dhamma. You don't need those things. They are meant for ordinary people to be able to sit down, do the meditation practice, and follow the path. That is kind of the whole purpose of these teachings. You see a lot of ordinary people at the time of the Buddha doing this, and so it is meant to be understood by those ordinary people. And I think that is a very good principle when you read the sutras, is to assume that the most basic meaning is probably the most likely one, or certainly the most important one. Why? Because that is the meaning that everyone can understand. So this makes good reasons for translating in this way. And then we have this number of words here: keen, aware, and mindful. So these are adjectives, these are criteria that you have to have in place to be able to do this meditation. Yeah, they define what this meditation is about. And one word there which is important is mindful. Yeah, satima. And what that means is that you have to have the mindfulness established before you do this. Yeah, this is what it says here. You have to have these qualities, have to be there. Otherwise, you're not really doing Satipatthana meditation. So you have to be mindful first. Yeah, this gets established first. And then you can do this particular meditation exercise. And you can see now how this fits together with the rest of the path. Yeah, I was talking about before, you have to purify your bodily conduct, your speech, and then you have to also have the right effort. And unless you have already purified, taken away, gotten rid of a large part of your defilements, the mind is not going to be stable. The mind is going to be desiring here, it's going to have a bit of ill will there, and that will take the mind out of the present moment, because that is what desire and aversion do. So you won't be able to have mindfulness. Yeah, you won't have the ability to stay in the present moment. That's what a large part of mindfulness is, this awareness in the present moment. So it tells you a lot about what you have to do before you actually get to meditation practice. You have to fulfill all these other aspects of the path. You sit down, you feel your mind. Where is your mind at? Is it hanging out? Are you hanging out in the present moment? Or is your mind all over the place? And if it is a bit all over the place, well, then you need to do something to stabilize it first, and then you can do Satipatthana practice. So get these things right. If you get these things wrong, and you think that you can just sit down and watch your breath and do whatever, you are very likely to end up wasting a lot of time and not really getting the benefit of the meditation. So remember these things, and then you will be able to use the path in the appropriate way. It's always the path of Buddhism is about knowing what to do when. Yeah, knowing what do I need to do now? Do I need to watch the breath, or do I need to purify my mind? Do I just need to chill and relax? Do I need to have a sleep? Do I need a cup of coffee, cup of tea? Do I need... no, not watching TV doesn't fit in here. There's certain things that are not part of the practice. But whatever it is, yeah, you are wise about what you require, and then you will make progress on the path. But if you try kind of blindly to follow instructions that you're not ready for, it's not going to work. And this is why it's called a gradual training, because you are somewhere in that graduated sequence, and you have to know roughly where you are. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Yes?
Does the specificity of where you know you need to focus increase with practice? I should go to this particular 1 out of 31 parts of the body.
I think in terms of the 31 parts of the body, you need to know the purpose of the practice. The purpose is to overcome attachments to the body. So you just ask yourself, which one works the best for me for that purpose? So you understand what you need to do. But I think a lot of those, some of those parts may not be as obvious. The skin is there and the hair is there. They may not be kind of put you off so much, but the internal organs might be more off-putting, in terms of seeing the beauty in the body. So you just know what works, what kind of leads to a sense of dispassion, a sense of reduction of desires and attachments. So this is so important. So if you have a lot of problems still with kind of right speech, and saying the right thing, then come back to the basics. It's not embarrassing to accept that you are at the beginning of the path. It's much more important to kind of get it right than to kind of think that, I must, watch the breath or whatever and get it all wrong. And then things will work for you properly as a consequence. So satima, a very important one. And we will see later on, I'm going to have a look at the Anapanasati Sutta as well. And it says exactly the same thing. It says, satting parimukkhang upatapetva, which means you have established mindfulness in front of you. This is prior to even watching any breath at all. Yeah, you establish mindfulness, then you go to the breath meditation. Establishing mindfulness means, again, it means that you have a certain clarity about the present moment. You are kind of here, yeah, you are aware of what's going on, and you feel relatively clear-minded. You're not confused or tired or restless or anything like that. So you have presence and a degree of clarity. That's what mindfulness is. And then you can watch the breath. And the exact amount of mindfulness is going to vary a little bit, but that is what you have to figure out yourself in your own practice to get a feeling for what works and what does not work. So satima, yeah, first one. Satima is also a name used by certain monastics. There's a bhikkhuni called Satima. So anyway, that's a sidetrack. So then we have the other two factors that you have to have. You have to be aware. Yeah, this is again sampajanya. And this is what we looked at before, whether sampajanya is a sampajanya of the various postures and whatever is part of the Satipatthana practice. And it is here, it is part of it in a general sense, that when you are practicing, if you're watching the breath, for example, you also have sampajanya at the same time. What that means is that you have clarity about what you're doing, whether you're doing the right thing, whether you're heading in the right direction, whether you are fulfilling the purpose of what you're supposed to do. So this is how sampajanya is often talked about in Buddhism. It has two aspects to it. Sampajanya refers to the purpose of what you're doing and the suitability of what you're doing here. So are you fulfilling the purpose when you're doing here? Am I heading in the right direction? And am I doing what is suitable to fulfill that purpose? And if those two characteristics are in place, then it means that you have sampajanya. You know what's going on. So if you're watching the breath and suddenly you start thinking about that cup of tea, that cup of tea. This tea is just sitting there. That's terrible. Okay, that's not really sampajanya, but I'm gonna distract myself just for a moment because I suddenly reminded myself of the tea when I was supposed to talk about sampajanya. Yes. They are separate, but they are related to each other here. So sampajanya is more like a wisdom quality here. Sati can be completely without wisdom. You can be aware of what is going on without having any wisdom to it. Sampajanya is what reminds you whether you are kind of doing the right thing or not. You can be aware of anything, doing this, doing that, but it may be completely nonsensical thing to do, but you still can have awareness about those things. So when you have sampajanya, it is like you are meditating and suddenly you think about your tea or you think about whatever else, and that is when you have lost your sampajanya. Sampajanya is what tells you, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to think about tea, I'm supposed to watch my breath, so you go back to your breath. The tea is a small thing, it's not a problem. There are worse things than thinking about tea. But anyway, whatever kind of reminds you and brings you back again to the meditation object, that's sampajanya. So you know what is suitable. So if sometimes you might be watching the breath, and the breath might be purposeful in one way, but if you are not, haven't got the mindfulness or other qualities are missing, then it may not be suitable. It may not be the suitable thing to do now. Maybe instead you need to sit back and overcome some defilements and think about things in the right way, overcome some negativity, whatever it is, and then come back to the breath meditation afterwards. Doing the right thing at the right time, remembering suitability and purpose of what you're doing here. And sampajanya is something that you use throughout your entire life, all the time, reminding yourself of whether what you're doing is going to be helpful or not for progress on the Noble Eightfold Path. So you can use that, and this was kind of the purpose with the passage that we had a look at before, the idea of having sampajanya when you talk to people, when you about sleeping, about walking and all that. Actually, let's have a look at it. This is the passage I said doesn't really belong in the Satipatthana Sutta is this passage here, yeah? Sampajanya, situational awareness, and you have it in regard to all of these things, going out, coming back, looking ahead, bending and extending the limbs, wearing the ball and robes and these things, eating and drinking and chewing, etc., urinating and defecating, walking, standing, sitting and sleeping, waking, and all of these things, yeah? You have sampajanya about. And the point is that you know whether you're doing these things appropriately, so it actually enhances your practice of the path, or you're going in the wrong way. So this is, again, not something that belongs really to meditation practice. It belongs to what we do outside of meditation, yeah? Am I doing something which is going to the casino? Is that a good idea or not? Yeah, that sort of thing. Is it gonna increase or decrease your mindfulness if you go to the casino? Usually, it's bad for mindfulness and bad for greed and bad for all kind of things. So you don't go there. Or is this particular TV program? Do I have to see this TV program, or is it better not to? But again, so this is kind of how you use the idea of sampajanya in daily life. But you can see here how it is very much about monastics, robes and bowls and all these kind of things. So it is certainly very much part of the monastic life, but you can also bring it into lay life to some extent. So there you are, sampajanya, an important part of Buddhist practice. And then you have the last word, not the last word, but another important word there, the keen. And this the word keen is atapi in Pali, and atapi means that you have a degree of energy in your practice, you have a degree of effort in your practice. There is two words that is used in the Pali Suttas quite a bit, and we saw those words briefly before. One is the effort, and effort is padana or vayama. Another word is energy. Energy is virya. And these things are not exactly the same. Yeah, padana is when you actually apply yourself. You apply yourself to make sure that your mind is in the right spot. You actually use whatever energy you have. So it's application of the mind. Whereas energy is actually the natural energy that arises in the mind as a consequence of moving forward on the path. So when your meditation is working, or you're feeling really good about yourself, you're feeling happy, there is often a natural energy in the mind. Yeah, you know what I mean? Sometimes you feel energized inside, and that is virya. And atapi, this word keen here, is kind of somewhere in between those two. There's a little bit of application of using effort, but there's also an energy there. And as you go through the Satipatthana, as you abandon these defilements, the energy goes up and it becomes a natural effort whereby you're just enjoying the meditation and you don't actually have to apply yourself. You don't have to make an effort because it happens more or less automatically. So you are keen. Yeah, you're a keen meditator. You come back to the meditation all the time and you're energized by this. This is the ideal kind of energy here. And then we have the last one there, which is rid of desire and aversion for the world. Yeah, loke abhijja domanassa. And the point about this is that, again, is the idea that you have given up a large part of your defilements. You don't have any great desires for anything. Your mind is fairly peaceful. You're able to remain in the present moment. This is what this means. And what is interesting about this particular phrase, abhijja domanassa, if you go to the formula for sense restraint, that phrase is found in that same formula for sense restraint. Sense restraint comes earlier on in the path. Yeah? First comes sense restraint, and after sense restraint you come to Satipatthana later on. So sense restraint is what actually does the abandoning of desire and aversion. And then when you come here, it says rid of. In other words, you have already abandoned it. This is the nice thing about these suttas, is that you can see how they all tie together like this. The same phrases occur in one place as occur elsewhere, and they tie together very nicely. Let me show you how that works, because it is it's kind of nice to see how this works. Let's find the gradual training. I'll just come to the gradual training. And so the gradual training, Majjhima Nikaya 27, this is one of my favorite suttas. So here you are. Yes, this is the famous sutta on the simile of the elephant's footprint. So we have the simile going on and on and on, and then comes the actual gradual training. And you can see here the gradual training starts off by a Buddha arising in the world, someone becoming fully enlightened. And then once that has happened, then he teaches the Dhamma over here, and then someone hears that teaching. And then when they hear that teaching, they think all these things. Living in a house is cramped and dirty, etc. Going forth is wide open, so they decide to become a monk or a nun on that basis. They shave off their hair and beard. Not nuns, but the monks shave off the beard. And then you dress in the ochre robes, something like this. And then you go forth. And then after you go forth, you train in the various things. So you you give up the killing of living beings, you renounce rod and sword, and stealing and unchastity and lying and divisive speech and harsh speech and talking nonsense. So, and then you have all these minor things like not injuring plants and seeds, And then you have this little passage on contentment. There's a beautiful passage on contentment there about being content just with your robe and alms bowl and not really having any desire for anything outside of that. And then after that, after all of this basic morality has been put into place, guess what we have seen up there? This is again the gradual training, one thing coming after the other in a natural sequence. This is it's a really nice sutta actually, and tells you where you are on the path. Then this next thing here, this is called the sense restraint. And so you see a sight with your eyes. You don't get caught up in the features and details. Because if the faculty of sight were left unrestrained, bad, unskillful qualities of desire and aversion would become overwhelming. For this practice, they practice restraint, protecting the faculty of sight, achieving its restraint. So the purpose here, quite early on in the path, is to guard your mind, which means having a degree of mindfulness, and guarding your mind for the purpose of overcoming desire and aversion. This is abhijja domanassa, exactly the same word that we see in the Satipatthana Sutta before. So this is what you do first, And once you do that, and actually let's continue on, because this whole paragraph here is the sense restraint paragraph. Then once you have that sense restraint, then you come to sampajanya. So here it is, sampajanya. We have just been talking about all of those bits and pieces coming together very nicely. And then when that sampajanya, when you practice that, then comes the meditation. You see here, it has the idea that you frequent a secluded lodging, a wilderness, the root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a forest, the open air, a heap of straw. And of course, this is all about meditation practice. So now comes the meditation, after you have done all of the preliminary things, after the sampajanya and after the sense restraint. And then here, this next paragraph is all about the giving up of the 5 hindrances. And then after that, down here, comes the first absorption, the jhana states. So this is all about giving up the 5 hindrances. And that passage on giving up the 5 hindrances there is just another way of talking about Satipatthana practice. Why? Because Satipatthana is about giving up the refined hindrances of the mind, the upakilesa, and this here is the last giving up of defilements before you get to the jhanas just afterwards. So all of this, kind of, you can see how it hangs together very nicely. Sense restraint, avoiding the bad qualities of mind, the coarse bad qualities of mind. Then the sampajanya, which tells you that you are doing appropriate things, especially as a monastic, so as not to give rise to unwholesome qualities. Then when that is done, then you find a secluded spot. Then you go to meditate somewhere, yeah? And then you abandon the 5 hindrances and you enter samadhi, etc. So this particular sutta, the shorter elephant's footprint, is a standard kind of set that you find many places in the suttas, known as the gradual training here. And it's a wonderful little sutta, and you can base a whole retreat around that sutta. You can talk about it for pretty much, not forever perhaps, but at least until you get to Nibbana, which is often a long time. So that is that one. Yeah, so now you can see the connection there between Satipatthana, yeah, and this rid of desire and aversion. It comes from the idea of sense restraint. So this is what you have to have in place, yeah, and once this is in place, then you can start observing an aspect of the body. So there's a lot of kind of prerequisites, yeah. Maybe you thought mindfulness of breathing was easy. You just come here to BF and just watch your breath, and that's it. It is not that simple. Yeah, it is. In fact, it is very simple, but the problem is that it is so simple that often you can't do it, precisely because you're not ready yet to do it. Mindfulness of breathing is actually very, very easy once it kind of works. It's just a matter of putting in the preliminary things first of all. So there you are. That is what that is all about. And then you have exactly the same for observing feelings, observing an aspect of the mind, and then lastly, observing an aspect of principles, which is the very last one there. Does this make any sense to anyone? I'm talking really probably a lot, jumping back and forth and probably confusing at least some of you. Sometimes I confuse myself a little bit with this. So, any comments on this? Anyone disagrees with what I'm saying? Am I talking nonsense, you reckon, or does it make sense? Okay, so good. So maybe in that case, we can maybe look a little bit more at the actual contemplation of mind. Yeah, and see what that is, and then we will kind of come back to some of the look at it from various points of view. But I think now the time has probably come to look at the actual mind contemplation, how it is done, what it means from this point of view, and then we will come to the Anapanasati Sutta later on. Yeah. Channel ground is. It looks like it is added later on, but it is not. It is very quite similar in many ways to the 31 parts of the body. So it kind of belongs a little bit with that, but it is probably added later on. And 4 elements is maybe even more likely to be original because it is actually found in a number of the suttas on Satipatthana. So that is. Again, very similar in principle to the 31 parts of the body, because all of this is to see the body in a more neutral fashion. I should actually make that point, that when you do things like the 31 parts of the body, don't take it too far. Yeah, if you take it too far, then you end up becoming maybe very depressed or very sad, or make lives really miserable, yeah, because it kind of takes away the joy in life sometimes if the body is seen as something completely terrible. So remember what this is about. It's not about feeling bad about the body. It is about neutralizing an attachment, neutralizing a bias. That is the point of this. So normally, I would not usually recommend most lay people to do these kind of contemplations. You can do the 4 elements, if you like, because that's more neutral. But the 31 parts of the body is depending on how you live your life. Yeah, depending if you are on retreat or living at home, depending on whether you're living by yourself or living in a relationship, and all of these kind of things. But generally speaking, you cannot both indulge in sensual pleasures and give up the body at the same time. That's impossible. So if you live an ordinary life, in a relationship, it is not really necessarily all that useful, maybe except on retreat, to do this kind of contemplation. Why? Because if on the one hand you indulge, and on the other hand you try to do this, indulgence is always going to win out, because indulgence is where you perceive happiness and pleasure, and this is not going to seem very pleasurable at all. This is going to lose out. So you have to kind of give up the indulgence side a bit more, and only then is it possible to neutralize these things. But you don't have to do these kind of things. Actually, I think the majority of, I don't know, that many monastics who do the 31 parts of the body anyway, and this is kind of the point, one of the main points that I want to make about Satipatthana. It is enough to watch the breath. And if you do watch the breath in a wise way, and you think about the world in the right way, you have a little bit about right view about where real happiness is to be found and where it can't be found, you will be inclining in the right direction anyway. You don't have to do things like the 31 parts of the body. You can try, see what happens. It may not, see how it goes. It might be better to think about the 4 elements. 4 elements is quite nice. You just see the body as no different from the world outside. The body rises from the earth and it goes back to the earth when you die. So it kind of just dissipates, becomes part of the planet, and that's kind of nice. I suppose, because it means that the body becomes something far less personal, and this is the problem. We take the body as personal. This is my body. Please keep your hands off my body. This is what the Me Too movement is all about. Keep your hands off my body, and this is the part of the problem. If the body is less, you have less of that kind of attachment, then it becomes less of a problem. Okay, so now let's come to, so that is the body contemplation. Then you have the feeling contemplation. Then comes the observing the mind. So what does this actually mean in practice? So this is what it says here. And how does a mendicant meditate, observing an aspect of the mind? It's when a mendicant knows a mind with greed as mind with greed, a mind without greed as a mind without greed. They know a mind with hate as a mind with hate, and a mind without hate as a mind without hate. They know a mind without delusion as a mind with delusion as a mind with delusion, and a mind without delusion as a mind without delusion. They know a constricted mind as constricted, and a scattered mind as scattered. They know an expansive mind as expansive, an unexpansive mind as unexpansive. They know mind that is not supreme as mind that is not supreme, and a mind that is supreme as supreme. They know mind immersed in samadhi as mind immersed in samadhi, and mind not immersed in samadhi as mind not immersed in samadhi. They know the freed mind as the freed mind, and the unfreed mind as unfreed. So this is all you know all of this stuff. It's pretty good to know all of that. It's quite. So first of all, the problem here, there's no Pali, right? So would you want to see the Pali? Well, this is the nice thing about this website. You go here, and then you go down, and you see here. You go line by line, click, ding. Okay, when enabled, and then you go back down, and voila! This is now you have the Pali and English together. It's a pretty cool website, I have to admit. So there you are. So there you have it all together here. So the purpose of this, as you can see here, is that you have on the one hand you have the unwholesome qualities of mind, and then you have the wholesome qualities of mind. So the purpose here is to observe the difference, to be clear about what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. Why do we want to do this? And the reason is because if you're going to overcome the unwholesome, you have to know what it is. If you're going to move towards the wholesome qualities, you have to know what they are. And this is kind of the basic idea to understand wholesome and unwholesome. Some of the words, some of the translations here are maybe not to be honest, maybe ideal. It's very hard to translate. So, but the word greed, for example, here is a translation of the word raga. The sa just means with, but raga is really the word here that it is about. And raga is very similar to desire. It just means desire of any kind, a very broad range of desire, usually referring to unwholesome desires. Yeah, so it is very, so you know what the idea of raga is, unwholesomeness. And then you have the opposite, the vita raga over here. This means the mind without greed. Yeah, so how do we, so what is this all about? How do we know these things? And first of all, in your meditation practice, you just observe. So you become aware of these things. You know what is happening in your mind. You don't analyze. You don't think this is a mind with greed. At this point, all you do is you gather information, yeah, and you see these things without actually reacting to it. And then in the last part of the Satipatthana Sutta, it comes to the Dhammanupassana, which is understanding principles. And at that part is where you start to analyze more. Yeah, you think back on the qualities that you had in your meditation, and then you reflect about how they arose, what are the causes for the arising, how they come to be abandoned, and these kind of things. So the meditation process is one of gathering the data. You just sit back, you observe, you allow things to be, and when the data have been gathered, you reflect on them afterwards. And for this reason, when you come to the very last part of the Satipatthana Sutta, it is much more detailed about how to reflect, because you look back on the process and you remember what has happened. So, for example, let's now, raga here is very closely related to the first hindrance. Let's go down to the last part of the Satipatthana Sutta. Yeah, this is Dhammanupassana, and we see how it relates to this one. So here it says, yeah, when the mendicant has sensual desire in them, they understand I have sensual desire in me. When you don't have sensual desire, you understand you don't have it. Yeah, they understand how sensual desire arises, how when it's already arisen, it's given up, and how once given up, it doesn't arise again in the future. So here is where you analyze that experience. First of all, you gather the information under the Chittanupassana. Yeah, you are aware of what is happening in your mind, and afterwards you analyze it in this way by understanding what these things are, how they arise, how it is given up, and then how it doesn't arise again in the future. So why does it arise? Why does sensual desire arise? The reason why it arises is because you are focusing on an object in a way by which it arises. You are focusing on the pleasurable aspect of an object. And when you look for the pleasurable aspect in that beautiful chocolate cake, it won't be long before you're eating it, yeah? Because you are focusing on, this is what sensual desire is about, focusing on the beautiful, the subhanimitta. Yay, it is also wonderful. And then, so how then is it, so you look back and you realize that in your meditation experience, these defilements arose because of that silliness, yeah? If you're supposed to watch your breath, but you end up thinking about chocolate cake, then, it is, that's the kind of not really working quite right, yeah? You have a problem there. Does anyone have that problem before? You think about chocolate cake when you, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, or whatever, yeah, thinking about whatever it is, and this is the thing, and then you get really distracted, and you can find your mind is not really content anymore. That is part of the problem. So how do you give that up? And the reason why you give it up, or how you give it up, is because you realize it is problematic. It stops your meditation. It leads you astray. It leads to problems. It doesn't lead to the happiness of meditation at all. And when you realize where real happiness lies, and this is kind of where it's hard, yeah? This is where you really have to reflect, to understand. This is about right view. Where does real happiness actually to be found? When you get that, you can give up the kind of the cravings and the things that lead to distractions of the mind. And then you also understand how it doesn't arise in the future, how it doesn't arise in the future. It's by not paying attention in the wrong way, and then entering samadhi, regularly. If you enter samadhi regularly, it won't happen. So that is pretty hard, kind of high bar to clear, entering samadhi regularly, but that is really ultimately how you avoid these things. Okay. So this is the contemplation of the mind. So that is the first one, the greed and without greed. And one of the ways of knowing the mind with greed is simply by knowing the mind without greed. If you know the mind without greed, you also know the mind with greed by extension, because these are opposites of each other. If you know the absence of something, that's the most powerful way of understanding something. Then we have hate. The Pali word is dosa. Ill will is better. Hate usually means a very strong mental state, but this is more like ill will, or you having a negative feeling about somebody. Why does ill will arise? Because you're seeing something that is not pleasurable, something which is patiga nimitta. Patiga means that you are resisting it. There's a resistance in you towards seeing this, and then if there is a resistance towards it, then it can easily give rise to ill will. This is how you can feel that sometimes. You're meeting someone, don't really want to see them or whatever because of whatever has happened in the past. You feel a resistance towards somebody, and then not long after, the kind of the ill will starts to arise. So this is how that. So what do you do then? Well, you think about that person in a different way. You change your attitude to that person, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about that later on. That's how it comes about. Delusion. Then you know the mind of delusion, a mind without delusion. And what is delusion here? And delusion here can be understood as the last three of the five hindrances, as referring to anything which relates to doubts and misunderstandings, and even perhaps tiredness and restlessness as well, even though they are actually mentioned separately later on. So delusion is any kind of thing where you feel you don't know what's going on and you're led astray and you kind of are just all over the place. This is delusion. So you understand even delusion here to some extent. Then you have the constricted mind. Constricted is the mind which is tired, or which is kind of, you have lethargy and no energy in the mind. It's kind of constricted inside. Scattered mind is the restless mind, and the agitated mind, which is all over the place. This is similar to the fourth hindrance, constricted to the third hindrance. And so these are all the negative qualities, and that is really where they come to an end. And then the last qualities that we're supposed to know are these beautiful qualities, the expansive mind. Expansive mind here is the mahagata. Maha is great, gata is like gone. So the mind which is gone to greatness, which is expansive. And this is like a mind whereby you are getting close to samadhi, where your mind is expanding out. It is encompassing, kind of, not yet fully expansive, not like a jhana state, but already is a feeling of having a mind which expands out into the world and has a positive relationship with things around you. And this is mentioned specifically in the sutras, where you kind of deliberately expand your mind through meditation practice. And then you have the opposite, the unexpansive mind. Then you have the supreme mind, which is the uttara citta. And the anuttara citta should be here. What is happening here? Supreme, unsupreme first. And anuttara is the mind which is not gone beyond. Anuttara means like a very high state of mind. And here we are probably getting close to like the jhana states. Then you have the immersed in samadhi mind, the samahita citta, and the mind which is not immersed in samadhi. And then you have the last one, the vimutta citta, and the avimutta citta, the mind which is freed or not freed. So what do all of these things mean? And what they mean, these all relate to the high qualities that you start to get when your mind gets really still and peaceful. Mahagata citta, the feeling of the mind expanding into the world, a very beautiful feeling when you feel that. The barriers are broken down, and you get this feeling of being, of moving, encompassing all other beings with kindness and with positive thoughts and feelings. This is what you're seeing here. Anuttara, mind without barriers, spreading out into the world. You have no ill will or negativity against anyone. And then the samahita chitta, the mind which is kind of coming together, where there is no not dispersed, and these kind of things. And lastly, the vimutta chitta. And the vimutta chitta, liberated mind, is a reference to the mind which enters a jhana state, a deep state of samadhi, where the mind is liberated from all the opposing qualities. The opposing qualities is basically the sensual world. The sensual world and the body are completely gone at this particular state, when you get to this particular point. So these are all the qualities that we are supposed to experience ideally as you go through this process. So all the bad qualities and all the good qualities. Remember that when we are talking about bad qualities here, we mean fairly refined bad qualities, because the majority of bad qualities have already been abandoned. We're talking about here is refined things, small things of negativity, small things of attachment, of raga and desire, minor delusions, nothing major. So small little things whereby you may feel that you're already fully purified. Your mind may feel completely together, but actually it isn't. Because if it was really together, you would be going into samadhi a long time ago. So there still are problems there. So you're trying to uncover these deep problems in the mind. And this is what makes meditation so interesting. And this is what makes Satipatthana meditation in particular so fascinating, because you may think that you're already doing really well, already experiencing happiness and joy, but there is more down the track. There's more to be had. And the reason why you're not getting there is because there are these refined upakilesas in the mind that you have to dig out. Throw them out, and as you throw them out, the mind goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And this is the purpose of this kind of meditation. You observe these things. Then, when you come to the Dhammanupassana, which is the next one, you contemplate the principles, you understand the causality, how these things arise, and then you avoid them in the future because you understand how it all hangs together. So, anyway, so that is the Chittanupassana, what these things are, and it may not be very clear to you at all exactly how you're supposed to do this. It says there you contemplate these things, but exactly how this happens may not be very clear. And this is where the Anapanasati Sutta comes in, the sutta on mindfulness of breathing. It ties everything together very nicely and then shows you how this is done in practice. So, there you are. Are you... What do you think? Is it anyway, I'll let you think about this for half an hour or so, and you can, recharge a little bit and see what you think. And then if you... yeah. There's a duty pertaining to it. Yeah. It is. There is a duty pertaining to it, but there's two things. One of all is the fact that you know them first of all, and then you reflect on them to understand them. And then next time you come to it, once you have understood what is going on, then you have sufficient information to know how to avoid it in the future. So you need a bit of contemplation to understand the problem, and then once you have understood the problem, then it is possible to avoid it next time around when you come back to it. So there is a duty to overcome it as true, but sometimes you need to reflect a bit before you can apply that duty here. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you will see that, but there is a point whereby you're just kind of taking in the information, and then there is a point when you reflect back on what happened. And that is often when you fully understand what is going on. You cannot really fully understand it while you are observing it, because if you start fully understanding it, not re-observing it anymore, you're actually thinking about it and you're contemplating it. So you need to distinguish between observing and contemplating afterwards. They're not exactly the same thing. And then I think that is the way it comes out in the Anapanasati Sutta, which we'll have a look at later on. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a break, and we'll see you back again in about half an hour or so.